Hey, Professor Ginsburg. So here's my midterm update on my student teaching so far at Mount McGill. So first, I want to start off with my classroom management, which was round one of supervision with Dan. Um, I thought that my first round with Dan when he was in classroom, I felt that I could have done a lot more better. I think that I'm reaching or I'm approaching competency now as opposed to when he first came into the classroom. I felt that I was definitely developing competency. But and I explained to Dan along with my guy teacher, we explained to him that in our first meeting that my classroom is a very rowdy, I guess you want to call it, classroom. There's a lot of students who are not troublesome, but they do have some issues that are related to behavior and are very, I guess, if you want to call it for lack of a better word, rowdy. So Dan knew from the get go that my classroom was very difficult, and thinking that when I was being observed by Dan the first time around, I thought that I did a very mediocre job of controlling my class. But Dan said that I did the best I could to show students that I am the teacher and that I'm kept my cool. So that's something that I think is helping me a lot now with my classroom management skills. Is that I don't show my emotions to the students when I'm upset at them or aggravated at them. Also, the rapport that I've built with my students, it's a lot better now. At first, it took a while for them to open up more to me. I feel now that I have a better rapport with them, so that definitely is helping me a lot more now um, with classroom management. The second one, lesson planning instruction. It was no surprise that I knew that my lesson plan that I had prepared might not be completed the first time around for the live one. Since my classroom is low performing and with low rating levels, it does take my students a lot longer for them to take notes and read notes in class, as well as doing class activities. But I do feel that I do scaffold a lot. I do differentiate a lot. I use a lot of News Ella when it comes to reading in my class. So every time, and since I do have a block schedule, it's a 2 hour period. Realistically, there's only about an hour and 40 minutes of instruction. Um, I do use News Ella articles in between lecture notes, so that way the students get a mental break of just taking notes and being able to read. Um, and so that's a lot of my lesson planning is currently. We do a lot of reading, but the reading is scaffold. It is differentiated. Their majority of the class is at a fourth grade reading and writing level, so I do ask them to read fourth grade reading level materials at the beginning of the semester. But progressively, I am increasing the reading levels, and that's something that I explained to my supervisor Dan and to my guide teacher Anthony Garcia, and they both thought it was a great idea to push my students a little further down. And also, the only setback with lesson planning really is the just the time factor. I mean, timing is a little off, but then again, I do my best to really answer my students' questions and check for understandings too. I do want to make sure my students do understand the material because some of the material that we're going through is so heavily dense, especially in this modern time. So there's a lot more information available for them. Um, and just going back onto lesson planning as well. Um, I do try my best to model as much as I can when it comes to any type of assignments that we do in the lesson planning. For my second virtual observation with lesson planning, I actually read out one of the responses that one of my students actually did. And because majority of the time I'll ask my students to either give me a paragraph summary or to give me a bullet points in regards to what we read or reflected. And a lot of the times it would just give me like a one, two, or three even sentence paragraph. But once I read to the students the work that one of the students did, I saw a dramatic increase of students' ability to write more because now they can see that this is my expectation, this is what I want from you guys. You guys are capable of writing an amazing short paragraph that is thoughtful and insightful and citing evidence. and just really calling out that one student who did a fantastic job. I think that's something that really encourages the students to push themselves even further, even though they think in their minds that they're not going to achieve anything. But in reality, they are capable of doing it. I mean, I can see it already every single time I am checking for knowledge in every single lecture. Um, it's amazing that how much or how intuitive a lot of their questions can be. It may be a little unorthodox sometimes, but they are having habits of mind. They are critically thinking a lot of the processes and thinking that goes into the classroom. So that's a little reflection on my student teaching in terms of the classroom management and lesson planning. So let me focus a little bit now on my guide teacher, my collaboration with them. So Anthony Garcia, from day one, the day we met last semester, he's been amazing. He has been on my side. He's been supportive. From day one, he has attempted to give me the proper tools needed for me to be successful as student teaching. He's been able to get me an email. He's been on the case of every single, administrator, tech person that been lagging on getting me an email, because the email basically set me up for everything else. He was able to give me access to my students' grades. He showed me how to input grades, how to look at student backgrounds, how to communicate with students via email, teachers, other teachers on campus, administrators, and especially parents, because the best way, and I found this through Anthony, is that the best way to communicate with parents is through email. Fortunately, a lot of the students, parents do go through phone numbers on a regular basis. And a lot of parents do appreciate us contacting them. And also just the fact that he gradually gave control to the classroom over to me in a short amount of time, of over the period of a month. I felt that that was the best way for me to be successful. And he knew those practices would eventually lead for me to be successful in the classroom. So now a little bit about my supervisor, Dan. So Dan's been very wonderful. He has been very reasonable. When it comes to scheduling my observations, I know that having a block schedule doesn't have the most flexibility, because he will have to come on certain days of the week, and he'll have to be there, 2 hours during the time period. But he gives me great feedback during class, after class. He gives me hints and pointers. One of the things I took very well from him the first time around was an agenda. He told me that it's probably one of the best practices to have an agenda written out on the board, and every single day in class, even if it's a minimum day and we're just catching up on an assignment or assignments, he still encourages me to put up an agenda so that way the students know what they're responsible for that day. And the feedback that he gives me on my videos reflects what he tells me in person as well. Even though I don't understand some of the abbreviations, I'm guessing I know what they mean, but at the time, when I'm reading it, I'm just blazing through it. So, but yeah, Dan, he gives me great feedback, gives me great strategies. He will criticize me if I am doing something that might be maybe not kosher, or maybe I can improve on. But I like the fact that he does encourage me to improve myself in terms of areas that I feel that I'm already competent in. For example, classroom management. Even though I have great rapport with my students, he still encourages me the best way to get to the students is just, give great rapport with them, The more they respect you, the better it's going to be in the long run. So I want to talk a little bit now about my strengths. I think my biggest strength right now in class, especially because we're doing a lot of modern history for world history, especially World War II, is that I am very knowledgeable in the subject matter. I mean, majority of my college courses were related to modern history. I took a whole course in World War II. I took a whole course in 20th century history. Cold War is coming up next month. So I have a lot of great stories. And the fact that I grew up in the same area as a lot of these students, I'm able to connect with them in many levels. So, for example, when we talked about the French resistance forces during World War II, and during the invasion of Normandy, we talked about how their primary job was to sabotage a lot of the areas. And one of the best ways for me to connect with the students was talk about what areas of Spring Valley would you want to sabotage or to attack or to take control of if you were taken over by a foreign nation. And we went off lists. We talked about the 125 Bridge, La Presa, Dictionary Hill. So the kids really enjoy the fact that I can relate to them, and I'm being upfront with them, and I'm not being fake with them. And that's something that I think is one of my biggest strengths, is that I can relate to these students. And especially since the majority of my students, about I want to say maybe 30 out of 40 of my students are Hispanic. I can speak to them, in the manner of Spanish, and they'll understand me, and they'll know. And I use the Spanish to my advantage too when it comes to disciplining the students, because they know that if I'm speaking Spanish to them, in their mind they know like their parents talk. They only speak to their parents talk to them in Spanish when they're in trouble. So I mean, I use that a lot, but I do like to relate to them a lot, especially just telling them, a little bit about myself every single day. I don't like to front load all of my backstory to them, but I do enjoy giving them a little bit of piece of information about myself, so that way they can feel more comfortable with me. So yeah, I mean, those I feel like some of my strengths currently in class. And areas of improvement, I mean, obviously classroom management. One of the biggest criticisms that my guide teacher always gives me is that I don't notice a lot of students either having their headphones in their ears or them doing other things on their tablets. Oh, I'm sorry, their Chromebooks. It's a one-to-one school, so every single student has the ability to have a Chromebook on them. But I do feel like I'm getting a little better in terms of spotting students using their headphones in class or using their cell phones for other things other than taking notes. I do allow my students to use their Chromebooks in class and their phones, as long as they're using it for notes, because we have all of our notes uploaded already online. And I know that a lot of my students have bad vision, so they'll use the tablets. They'll use their phones or their Chromebooks. But I do feel that that's definitely an area of improvement, because it does cause some distractions. I also need to find a way for my students to take notes more efficient. I told them in the beginning of class, just take down on notes on what you believe to be, the most important, or maybe come up with some shorthand strategies. But the way that we take notes right now, it's not the most efficient. It's taking my period 6 minutes to write down a slide, 6-7 minutes, as opposed to the period that I observe 3-4 minutes. So I do got to find some better ways in order for me to encourage my students to take better notes. And another thing as well, giving students getting the students to do their assignments in class, because almost every single day when we do either note taking or just the minimum days, we do have assignments to do, at least 1 or 2 a day. And it's just hard for me to have students do their assignments towards the end of the period. In between the 2 lectures, so I do a lecture, then we do an assignment together, either a reading or a short little, you want to call it, I guess, assignment, a worksheet. Then we do notes again, and at the end we'll have like a last one. I feel like that last one, I lose a lot of my students, because it's the end of the period, it's intervention time, and it's the last day of the period, 7th period. So they've been in school already for 6 hours, 7 hours plus, and they're just pretty much checked out at that point. So I got to find a way to encourage them to be more proactive in the latter half of the period after note taking. So yeah, President Ginsburg, that is my midterm. Thank you.